Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my epic rant on the 2023 science fiction epic fail that is Rebel Moon Part 1, Child of Fire. More like Child of Fire Crotch because this film is so bad that it gives you the clap. Now, before I go any further sharing my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Daniel for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Rebel Moon is essentially Zack Snyder's Star Wars project. That's really what it is. You can tell. There's laser swords. They're not lightsabers, guys. They're laser swords. It's different. And there's a very similar plot line involving a group of rebels going up against some kind of empire. I think they even called them the Imperial forces. So it's not even that far off. Like it's so close that it already sounds like a knockoff. And apparently Zack Snyder had an idea for a Star Wars film. And he actually pitched it to Disney. And Disney was like, nah, we're going to pass. And so that's why we have this original series of films and this whole new universe that Zack Snyder is working on right now, because he wasn't able to make his Star Wars project. So essentially he took his ball, went home, and then sold his ball to Netflix. This film, man, I went into this with low expectations, and it couldn't even get over the low bar that I set for it. And that is pathetic. The direction by Zack Snyder, to me, this is no exaggeration. This is his worst direction to date. His direction was so lethargic, so bland, when there wasn't an overabundance of useless slow-mo, that I honestly could not differentiate it from any average JAG, just another guy or just another gal director working today. There was nothing about the direction in this that made it stand out, at least not in a good way. There are moments that made it stand out in a bad way. Like with the slow-mo. Like Zack Snyder needs to stop. He needs to stop with the slow-mo because it's become a crutch, and at the same time, he's forgotten how to use it properly. So you have a lot of slow-mo scenes in this film, but none of them enhance or make the scenes that they're in better. It just becomes a distraction. It just becomes nothing but show. And there's nothing behind it other than, oh, hey, look at this. Look what I can do. Might as well have been directed by Stewart from Mad TV. Hey, look what I can do. Like that's really what you get here with the direction in Rebel Moon. Um, I just don't get Snyder's obsession with slow mo, especially when he's forgotten how to use it properly. It just exposes him as the bad filmmaker that he is now. I don't think he was always this bad. I mean, look at his direction in 300 and Watchmen, for instance, or even some of the scenes in Man of Steel. Like, I don't know what happened with Zack Snyder. Did he get replaced with the Body Snatcher, and the real Zack Snyder is dead? Like, it's honestly pretty fascinating to me. When I'm looking at how much he's fallen off as a director. And I wasn't impressed with his cut of Justice League either. So I'm not going to say that that was a highlight for him. And I don't think Batman versus Superman was a highlight either, other than the warehouse fight scene. Other than that, like a lot of that film had similar issues as this movie and Army of the Dead. But it seems like those issues just became exacerbated over the past few years. And Zack Snyder has lost his touch. Even the action scenes, they aren't shot in ways that really get the adrenaline pumping. They just look and just have this feel of weakness to them. They're just weak. There's no pop. There's no punch to them. They're there. There's some laser gun shootouts. There's a lot of scenes with Sofia Boutella trying to be the next badass super female, but none of it really clicks because a lot of the direction when it comes to the scenes featuring her, especially in hand-to-hand combat, just expose her limitations and just show how unbelievable it is that she is doing all of this stuff. He doesn't really know how to hide her limitations, so they're just in full view. He doesn't know how to get authentic, strong performances out of most of his cast. They're just floundering in front of the camera, and there are multiple scenes where the performances are just not even average. It's like he went with the first take, or he didn't know how that one particular take was bad and just went with it anyway. And the moments in the film that are supposed to have some sort of grandeur or some sort of spectacle, there are a couple scenes, admittedly, that kind of wow you visually. But those are very fleeting. Most of the time, the film looks very cheap. It doesn't look that impressive visually. And it looks like an average, or honestly more of a below average episode of a Disney streaming series. Specifically a Disney Star Wars streaming series. That's really what it looks like. Visually, it reminds me of that. Like Obi-Wan or some of these other Disney Plus streaming Star Wars shows. The Book of Boba Fett. Like, it has that kind of look and feel to it visually. And speaking of streaming series, that's what this should have been. And that was initially, I believe, the pitch for this film was a streaming series. And that's what it should have been, if you ask me. Because that would have enabled the limitations of the budget to be far less noticeable. And you could flesh out the characters more. You can flesh out the world more. You can do a lot more with a minimal plot line because you can stretch things out a little bit more than you can with two films. And Zack Snyder doesn't have to try to do too much, which that's what he does here. He writes and directs. And at this point in his career, he isn't capable of doing both anymore. So it hurts his direction because he's focusing on writing and working on the story and building this whole new universe, the cinematic universe of his, of Rebel Moon, and he's not able to put as much focus on his direction and honing his craft in that regard. Zack Snyder is a prime example of a director who has become stagnant. A director who in the past was considered to be a hot shot, an up-and-coming talent. And because of the reputation that he has received and garnered over the years, he's resting on his laurels. He thinks that he's already reached his peak. He thinks that he's already one of the best filmmakers of his time. And he's done nothing since his peak, which was a few years ago, to enhance and improve himself as a director and as a filmmaker, and definitely not as a writer. And so as a result, the more projects he does, the more films that he takes part in, where he is the prime creative force and the prime creative energy, the more he's exposed as being more of an average guy behind the camera and a below average writer. And if you did a streaming series, you could just direct the pilot episode. You could be involved as a producer. You can be involved with the story, characters. You can be involved behind the scenes. It can still be your vision. But if it fails, you can more easily wipe your hands of it. You could be like, well, yeah, I was involved with it. It was something I wanted to experiment with, but it didn't work out. But the way that it is now, with his name in the credits as the director, and his name also there as one of the writers, and it's based on a story by him, and with all the ways that he's talked about this film series and hyped it up, he can't escape the failure of Rebel Moon. And who knows, maybe this kind of high profile failure might create a light bulb moment for him, like a new awakening, a new renaissance for Zack Snyder, where he realizes that what he is doing currently is actually not good enough and he needs to do better. But until I see that, I don't honestly see that happening. I think his ego is too big to do that. And the screenplay by Zach, Kurt Johnstad, and Shay Hatton, this screenplay sucks. This is such a bad script. This script is so bad that it's kind of astonishing, in all honesty. And the reason why it's so bad is not because it's cliched. Yeah, it's reminiscent of Star Wars. It's got elements of The Hidden Fortress and A Bug's Life and Battle Beyond the Stars. Yes, Star Wars was all of those things. So many other films in this genre, in particular, are different spins on other already pre-existing IPs or ideas or stories. So the fact that this is reminiscent of something that came before it, that's not really that big of a knock against it. It's kind of a given. What's a bigger knock against this film is how badly it accomplishes core tenets of screenwriting. And what do I mean by that? A core tenet of screenwriting to me is providing a clear reason and an effective reason to care. To care about the plot, to care about the characters, and this screenplay fails to do both. Here is how Rebel Moon Part 1 fails to make you care. The plot is not only paper thin, I mean, the plot of this entire film is 45 minutes of a streaming series episode at best. There's not enough compelling plot elements or character beats to really warrant over 2 hours of screen time. It's stretching things so much and so often that they reach their breaking point about an hour in. The stakes are not high enough. In something like this that is a story that takes a place across the galaxy, having the majority of the film deal with a bunch of grain farmers doesn't work. Yes, they're innocent people. Yes, they're hardworking farmers who mean well, but there's nothing special about them. There's no special form of grain farming that they utilize that's more effective or better than anyone else. There's nothing about them that would make them so desirable for this Imperial force, for the enemy. And there's also nothing that makes it them so valuable to the story in terms of whether or not they all got killed, other than this vague connection with the lead of the film. And the vague connection is that Cora was taken in by these grain farmers after she escaped from the Imperium, or the Imperial forces, because she used to be a part of all of that prior to her becoming a runaway and a fugitive. And there's a few scenes with this older guy who I believe he's kind of like the sort of the head of the farm, and trying to establish him as sort of a father figure, but it never really connects. And so even that aspect of the script is a fail. None of these writers can effectively provide a concrete connection between Cora and the grain farmers other than they provided a place for her to stay. They provided her food. They gave her a place to hide and made her feel welcome. That's about it. Like, there's no, I don't know, member of the farm that she befriends to the point where they're like a sister or a brother to her. Nope. It's not like she has a lover and even has a child with him. Nope, you don't have any of that. So that also really affects the stakes. The connection between her and the farmers, it's so weak that you're like, who cares? Who cares about these farmers? Who cares about the grain? Who cares what happens to them? And another problem with the script is that you don't really know enough about Cora until like way later in the story, when they finally start to give you a backstory for her. And I never understood why people do this, why writers do this. They play this mystery game where they're just like, oh, you don't really know who this person is yet, but we're going to give you bits and pieces of who they are like way down the line. And I'm like, that just affects the pacing of the story in the film, because unless you're talking about something like Memento or some of these other actually well-written films that have these bits and pieces of somebody's life that are revealed throughout the movie, you have a hard time caring about these characters. And especially your main character, because you don't know anything about them. It just assumes that you're going to care about them because they're the focus of the story. But that's not enough of a reason to care. It also fails when it comes to establishing the villains as feeling like not only a real threat, but also as something that you can genuinely buy as a force that is going to dispatch your hero. Your hero is going to have a hard time beating this enemy force. I never really felt that way with the Imperium, the Imperial forces, because so much about the way that the scenes with these characters, with the Mother World, with Atticus Noble and Belisarius, so much about those scenes is so forced and so heavy-handed and so try hard in terms of trying to make them intimidating that it just comes across as the opposite. It comes across like they're a bunch of posers. They're posers of the Empire from Star Wars. It makes the fact that this is a knockoff of Star Wars all the more obvious. And so you have that going against the script. It fails at a core tenet of basic screenwriting, making you care about the plot and about the characters, especially your hero and your villain. And even the supporting characters aren't that strong. And there's a lot of them. And there's a whole chunk of the movie that is focused story-wise on finding these supporting characters. General Titus, Gunner, Nemesis, Darien Bloodaxe, Kai, Tarek, all of these other sort of characters that are going to be the team that Korra finds to help her on her quest to save this grain farm from this military force. And like I said, nothing is ever established about the grain farm being special, other than these are just a bunch of innocent, hardworking farmers, and a lot of them are families. It's just basic, just bottom of the barrel type of storytelling in terms of trying to make you sympathize with or care about these farmers. Oh, they're just a bunch of hardworking farmers. Like, you should want to care about them just for that reason alone. No. I'm sorry, I don't. And when it comes to some of the more interesting characters, like the robot that is introduced like in the first 20 minutes, Jimmy, the last member of this race of mechanical knights, you don't do anything with it. You introduce it and it's an interesting concept and has potential, and then the robot is never utilized again until the end of the movie, where it just turns at the camera and stares. And that's it. You're like, wow. So you have a genuinely potentially interesting, compelling new character, and you do absolutely fucking nothing with it. Instead, you focus on Korra, who might as well be Rey Skywalker, Rey Palpatine, to be more precise, because it's the same kind of thing where she's essentially another Mary Sue who can do it all, do everything. There are some moments where they try to give some angst or some kind of emotion to her because of her past, but it never really lands. And you never really see her get bested in battle that much. The only time that you ever see her be put at a disadvantage is when she gets trapped. But then as soon as she's released, she's just back to kicking ass and taking names and taking out half an army basically by herself. And if I liked the character more, and there were moments or lines of dialogue that made this character more endearing, then maybe I could just look past that. But since the script doesn't provide those things, this is such a lame lead. And the supporting characters, they aren't given a lot of screen time or enough depth to really make them stand out either. Gunner, he's just another farmer who secretly has a crush on Korra. Darien Bloodaxe, the way that he's written is pathetic. The writers build him up to be this strong force. This guy who's the leader of this rebel force, this rebel fleet of fighters. And he's the leader. So he's supposed to be this guy who's smart, he's intelligent, he's good in combat, he's good tactically. He would have to be if he's a leader of this rebel force that's done enough damage that it's got the attention of the mother world. But when it comes to seeing him in action, he's like a chicken with his head cut off. He's fucking running around, not knowing what the fuck he's doing. Half his entire fleet basically gets destroyed in one battle with little to no resistance whatsoever. He has no idea how to tactically plan anything, let alone a conflict. He can't think on his feet. So when he's ambushed, he doesn't know how to react. And there's this whole big moment where he's sacrificing himself for our heroes when he runs and jumps up with the spear and takes out the gunner and starts the process of taking the ship out, which crashes and explodes. But even he can't even do that right. The screenwriters can't even do him the justice of letting him do that in a way that's competent. He jumps up there, smashes through the window, and he still gets pumped full of like 3 shots by the gunner. He can't even take out a simple gunner with ease. He gets pumped with 3 shots, and with one last strike kills the gunner before he dies. I'm like, what a pathetic, lame ass leader of men this guy is. This guy doesn't deserve to be called Blood Axe. More like Axe, as an Axe body spray. He's about as badass and as effective in combat as a can of Axe body spray. And Terra isn't much better either. You don't really know much about him other than he has this debt that he needs to pay to this guy, this slaver character, and the slaver character is a gambler, and he's like, hey, if you can tame this bird creature, I'll let you go. Of course he tames it. You know that's going to happen. That whole scene felt just completely stretched out and padded. The stuff with Titus, he's a former general of the Imperium who is disgraced, and he's a drunk. Wow, never seen that before. There's this guy who is a wannabe Han Solo, who's a mercenary, and he's a starship pilot. He might as well have been flying the Millennium Falcon. Oh, but the thing is, he reveals himself to be a turncoat at the end, which also was incredibly obvious. It's because this script is just fundamentally bad on every possible level. Like, it can't even do anything like that properly. Like, there were moments in the script where you looked at him and you're like, yeah, I don't trust this guy. And then when it happens that he winds up becoming a guy who turns on our lead, our group of heroes, and sells them out to the Imperium, you're like, oh wow, I cannot believe it. I can't believe this guy who is shady as fuck. He turned on them? Oh no. And like I said, you have the robot who has a connection to the king and has this potentially interesting backstory. Nothing. You do nothing with the robot. Instead, we got to have a good chunk of the movie about this merc who is obviously going to be a bad guy. And speaking of bad guys, like I said earlier, the villain is weak and isn't charismatic, isn't given a lot of lines of dialogue to make him endearing to the audience in any way, or somebody that you love to hate. You're just indifferent on the guy. So when he ultimately gets in this final fight with your hero and he gets defeated, you're like, meh. And when he gets brought back from the dead at the end, you're like, what? Like, why? This guy isn't even an effective mini boss, let alone the main bad guy. Why are you bringing this guy back? So the script even drops the ball on that. Like, you would think, okay, all right, he's a guy that we're gonna throw out there make you think is the threat, but he's not the real threat. We're going to reveal the real threat at the end of part 1, so then we can show you the real threat in part 2, so we can have our Empire Strikes Back of our trilogy. No, we're not going to do that. This guy is brought back from the dead, and you're like, that's just lame. This guy sucks. But what else can you expect from a script that sucks this much? Like, the only moment in this entire screenplay that I kind of didn't mind was the battle between Nemesis and the Spider Woman, because it was a cool visual. It was interesting. There was some sort of semblance with the Spider Woman character, that there was another potentially kind of intriguing backstory for her when it comes to the parallels between her and Nemesis in terms of what they've lost. So much so that I thought it was going to build up to the Spider-Woman actually joining the team. Didn't happen. That would have been really cool too. Like, that would have made it more unique instead of, just lady with laser swords and robot hands, wannabe Han Solo, General Titus, who might as well be the same wizard character from Shazam, played by the same actor, but this time he's a general. Tarzan with his shirt off, Space Tarzan. I mean, instead of that, you could have a robot and a Spider Woman. Like, that would have been cool. That would have been unique. That would have been different. No, the script, we can't do that. We can't do that with this script. Because these screenwriters can't fucking write, apparently. Or they don't work well together. They're like oil and water. So you have a plot and you have characters that the screenwriters do not effectively make you care about any of them or any of it. And then it's all stretched out. And it's rough. And it's brutal to watch. The action sequences, they have no semblance or sense of excitement or thrills, because you don't care about these characters and you don't care about what's happening. You don't care about the plot. And the stakes, I will repeat again, are way too low. Grain farmers? We're talking about a galaxy here, and you're focusing on a bunch of fucking grain farmers. And the cast, it's not much better. Sofia Boutella, more like Sofia Coachella, because she would be better off at Coachella instead of trying to be the lead of this film. Because then she would be out of sight, out of mind, and she wouldn't be trying to act and failing so much. This actress, she's always been bad. She's always sucked. This is the same actress who was the mummy in the Tom Cruise Mummy movie, which was so bad I called it the Cummy. So she's back again and playing Cora and just not being at all a strong lead. She can't carry her own purse for 5 feet, let alone carry this movie. And it shows. It's not just because of the fact that she's built like a stick, although that doesn't do her any favors. It's the fact that she can't fucking act. You don't believe her when it comes to her showing emotion. You don't believe her when it comes to her playing the badass, trying to be Ellen Ripley, trying to be that kind of space hero. It's not anything that you find remotely believable in the slightest. And she also has no personality. She has no charisma. And Djimon Hounsou, I like him as an actor, but he's got nothing to do here. Barely any dialogue, barely any scenes. And like I said, it seems like he's just playing the same character that he did in Shazam, which I think he wasn't he in that? Yeah, he's still playing the wizard, complete with the same kind of beard. Ed Skrein, God, he sucks in this. Ed Skrein was good as Ajax in Deadpool. He was a good bad guy in that. His smugness worked for that because there were better writers and a better director. The smugness that he has here just comes across as he's being pompous. And as a result, it makes him come across as a snooty uh, prick. And it's not the kind of energy or the vibe that you want for your main villain. He doesn't come across as intimidating. He doesn't come across as a believable leader of an army. And I swear to God, like the approach that he has for this character and the performance is fuckboy Jeremy Irons. It's like he's trying to be like Jeremy Irons in terms of the way that he's presenting himself and acting, trying to be serious and pontificating, and then he's about as believable as a fuckboy on TikTok, trying to do Shakespeare. It's ridiculous. Michiel Huisman, who is basically poor man's I wouldn't say Pedro Pascal. That gives him too much credit. Uh, he's poor man's Diego Luna. That's really what he is. Michiel Huisman as Gunner, complete with the same beard and everything. Doona Bae as Nemesis. I like the actress. I kind of liked the character of Nemesis a lot because of what she brought to that character. I bought her in combat. Yeah, it's laser swords, but I still bought her in combat in comparison to everyone else in this movie. And her scene with the Spider Woman, who was played by Jenna Malone, uh, was like the only scene in the entire film that I legitimately really liked, other than the one scene with the robot in like the first 20 minutes of the movie. But other than that, there wasn't anything else that I really liked about the film, other than maybe like a couple of visual shots. Ray Fisher, oh my god, man! Like, yeah, I know the screenwriters didn't give you anything to work with when it comes to this character, but I don't think that excuses you from this inexcusably awful performance. Like, he's not doing himself any favors when it comes to his whole "I was blacklisted by Hollywood" and the experience on the set of Justice League with Joss Whedon was so terrible and abusive and blah blah blah. And maybe it was. And if that was the case, I'm sorry you had to deal with that, man. Nobody should have to deal with that kind of shit on the set of a film. That being said, nobody should have to be subjected to your shitty acting either. Like, you weren't great as Cyborg in either cut of those films, and you definitely weren't great here. Like, I was honestly pretty floored by how bad his acting was in this. What even the hell was that? And what kind of accent were you trying to do too, man? Like, what the fuck? Nothing about that performance was authentic. Charlie Hunnam, who, to me, his whole take on this character is dollar store Brad Pitt, but with an Irish accent. It really didn't do much for me, and I've always felt Charlie Hunnam was a pretty weak actor, and this is more of the same from him. Stenznir, like, man, this guy has all the charisma of a bottle of Nair. Like, this guy is not even remotely close to being ready to have a major role in anything. Like, this dude is like Jason Momoa from the Conan the Barbarian remake. That's really what you get here. It's proto Jason Momoa. Like, before Jason Momoa started to actually develop some semblance of an actual persona or personality, or find some charisma or screen presence. That's what you get here with Stenznir. Fra Fee as Balisarius. He's the tyrant. He's the adoptive father of Korra, who sees control of the mother world. Uh, Pretty generic performance, but whoever was his hairstylist and whoever set up his fake beard for the scenes that he was in should be fired, because that shit looked fake from 10 miles away. So that really did not help when it comes to trying to get into any scenes that he's in, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is so obviously a fake beard, and that is so obviously a wig. Cary Elwes, it was nice to see him again as a king, but he's not in it for that much screen time at all. Anthony Hopkins, yeah, he's the voice of the robot. It was a nice get for Zack Snyder and everybody involved, but you completely waste him because he's in it for maybe 2 minutes out of the entire 2 hour and 15-minute runtime. The cinematography, which is also by Zack Snyder, I did not know that. Zack, you can't do 2 things at once, let alone 3. No wonder this film looks so dull visually most of the time, because Zack Snyder was trying to do triple duty. What the fuck are you doing? You can't do it anymore. You can't do it, period. You can't be a triple threat. In fact, it's just a threat, an assault to everybody's senses and their eyes with you trying to be a triple threat filmmaker. You can't fucking do that, Zack. Hire a real cinematographer. That probably would have helped this film look more consistent visually, would have helped certain scenes stand out more. But no, instead, I'm going to do it all myself. You can't fucking do that. You're not that good. The editing by Dodi Dorn, I would say when it comes to like a couple action sequences, it's okay at best, but there's a lot of moments where the editing is also pretty bad. Scenes look choppy, and I've heard, oh, it might be because there's a director's cut. It doesn't matter what cut of the film you get here. Oh, what you will get if you see a director's cut of this is a film that's just as bad, if not worse, because now you take a bad film that didn't have enough content for 45 minutes of a story, and now you extend it to 3 hours or more with a little bit added CGI blood or gore. That doesn't make it better. And I'm tired of Zack Snyder thinking that he can just do director's cuts and that'll just fix all the problems with his shitty fucking films. And this is definitely one of those films. It's shit. I cannot believe this costs $166 million. This looks like it costs $6 million. If even that. This does not look like a $166 million production. Okay, apparently that was shared with Part 2, The Scargiver. Either way, they don't look like it cost that much. Okay, you split it in half. It still doesn't look like it costs that much money to make. And it's 134 minutes, which is 134 minutes too long. The music by Tom Holkenberg, I like that composer, but this score did nothing for me. I don't even remember a single note from it. Just as generic and forgettable as the majority of the film. And yeah, the 134-minute runtime, it's a slog. It's hard to sit through because you don't care. You do not give a single shit about the characters or the plot or anything that's happening. So it just makes it really tedious and slow-paced. And you feel every minute of the 2 hour and 15-minute runtime. And Zack Snyder thinks there's enough content for 2 films? He thinks that he had enough here for one big movie because that was the original plan after the streaming series plan didn't work out, is that it was just going to be one big long film. Having seen both parts, there's not enough for that either. I really don't know what else to say about this film except this film sucked. It was really bad. It was terrible. And it just further exemplifies how far Zack Snyder has fallen off as a filmmaker. Anyway, thanks for watching my rant on Rebel Moon Part 1, Child of Fire. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.